The morning sun hit the marble steps of the California state capitol like a spotlight on a stage. A sea of cameras, reporters, and restless spectators stretched across the lawn. The press conference was billed as a celebration, Governor Gavin Newsom unveiling his administration's $180 million expansion for new migrant shelters in San Diego, Sacramento, and Fresno. The podium was draped in banners, "California welcomes all." Applause erupted as Newsom emerged in his signature blazer, sleeves rolled, smile locked in place. He waved confidently, pausing just long enough for the flashbulbs to burst like fireworks. But one figure stood stone-faced just off stage, Karoline Leavitt. She wasn't invited. She didn't need to be. Dressed in a deep blue jacket, American flag pin on her lapel, she stood like a fixed pillar among the chaos. When a Fox affiliate reporter spotted her, the murmurs began. "Is that Karoline? What's she doing here?" 8 whispers darted behind Newsom's back. Staffers glanced nervously. But he pressed forward, unaware the tone was about to shift violently. "We believe," Newsom began, "that our moral compass demands we shelter the vulnerable, regardless of where they're from. We are a sanctuary because humanity has no borders." That's when Karoline stepped forward. No mic, no camera. Just a voice loud enough to pierce through every layer of curated politeness. "Then explain why your citizens are sleeping on sidewalks." Silence. Newsom looked up, brows furrowed. "Excuse me." Karoline walked directly toward the podium. She didn't stop at the tape line, she didn't blink. She pointed behind her, to a group of veterans sitting in folding chairs, one in a wheelchair, another with a cardboard sign reading, "Left behind by Newsom." "You build shelters for strangers, and step over your own. You want compassion? Start with Americans." Gasps from the audience. One woman clutched her pearls. A news anchor's voice cracked live on air, "We appear to be witnessing an unscripted confrontation." Newsom leaned on the podium. "Miss Leavitt, this is not your event." "No, Governor. It's their event," Karoline shot back, turning to the crowd. "You're just playing host while your house burns." And just like that, every camera swung toward her. The cameras stayed locked on Karoline. But it wasn't just the lens, every pair of eyes in the crowd had shifted. Even the reporters, usually loyal to their scripts, were whispering into their mics, unsure if they were still covering a policy event or watching history unfold. Governor Newsom's jaw was tight. He forced a controlled smile, one that looked more like a mask than confidence. "We're proud to be a sanctuary," he replied slowly. "And we don't need lectures from partisan extremists." "Extremists?" Karoline snapped. "You're spending taxpayer money on hotel rooms for foreign nationals while veterans sleep in tents 1 block from this building." Gasps again. This wasn't a protester with a sign. This was a woman with facts, and she came with receipts. Karoline pulled a single folder from her tote bag. She raised it high enough for the crowd to see. "Here's the real report. Your administration quietly diverted $23 million last quarter, money earmarked for homeless services, to fund migrant intake centers. That wasn't disclosed in your press release." 8 whispers became frantic mutterings. Newsom's top communications officer was already texting furiously. A security officer stepped forward, but Newsom held out his hand, stopping him. He knew it would only make things worse. "This isn't a stunt," Karoline said, her voice steady. "It's the truth. The numbers are in your budget. Page 89, subsection 3. That's when something shifted. A man in the audience stood up. Disheveled, shirt frayed at the collar. "I served 2 tours in Afghanistan," he said. "Been waiting 4 years for housing assistance." He turned to Newsom. "Where's my shelter?" Another woman stood. "I lost my son to fentanyl on a street corner in LA. We asked for help. You said the state was broke. But you found millions for people who broke the law crossing our border?" Newsom's eyes flicked to the press, then to his staff. Karoline took one step closer. "You say you're building hope. But all you're building is resentment, the crowd murmured. Even local news anchors were hesitating before cutting to commercial. The illusion of control was cracking. And then, with the air tense and the cameras rolling, Karoline raised her voice just enough to echo off the stone walls behind them. Charity that ignores your own people isn't charity. It's cowardice. She didn't yell. She didn't need to. The echo did it for her. The weight in the room shifted. You could feel it. Not just in body language, not just in the hush that fell over the audience, it was in the silence that came after truth lands like a hammer and no one dares pick it up. Karoline turned to the folder again, fingers gliding across color-coded tabs. Let's not play semantics, Governor. You said the funding was legal. I'm saying it's immoral. She opened the budget document and held it up. Line item 43F, under Emergency Housing Expenditures. It was reclassified quietly, money meant for disabled veterans, now redirected to a pilot shelter program for unvetted migrants in Fresno County. No public hearing. No transparency. Just a press release a week later with a headline about compassion. The crowd didn't gasp this time. They listened. Because it was worse than they imagined. Governor Newsom cleared his throat, trying to regain control. Miss Leavitt, the people of California have shown unmatched generosity in times of crisis. We're not going to be shamed by. I'm not shaming generosity, Karoline cut in. I'm exposing deception. She flipped to another page, this one highlighted and bookmarked. $6.5 million for emergency food access infrastructure. Sounds good, right? Except 91% of that money went to just 3 facilities in sanctuary cities, none of which serve American citizens directly. She stepped forward again, this time holding the folder out toward the press pen. You're welcome to fact-check me. It's all public record. Just not publicly explained. The reporters stared at her. No one reached for the folder, not yet. But several began scrolling through tablets, no longer interested in the prepared speech on Newsom's teleprompter. Karoline turned to Newsom one more time, voice low but crisp. This isn't a border issue. It's a betrayal issue. You built infrastructure for everyone, except the people who pay for it. You're not solving a crisis. You're shifting it. And then, like she had rehearsed it in her bones, she tapped the microphone. Governor, show me one line in this budget, just one, where our people come first. A pause. Newsom didn't answer. You can't, she said, because there isn't one. A single woman in the front row clapped. Then another. Then a group near the back rose to their feet. Not a protest, applause. The kind of applause that says, finally. Karoline closed the folder gently. It's not, America first, if Americans are last. Just as Karoline stepped back from the podium, 2 security staff began to move toward her from the side aisle, clearly instructed by someone behind the curtain. She didn't flinch. Instead, she raised a single hand toward them, not in defiance, but with the calm authority of someone who knew the rules better than the ones enforcing them. I'm not trespassing, she said into the mic, eyes fixed on Newsom. I was invited, by your staff. And unless this building suddenly stopped being owned by the taxpayers, you can't evict the truth. The guards froze, unsure. Cameras turned, and in that split-second pause, Karoline pivoted. She didn't look at Newsom. She looked straight into the camera lens. Let me tell you about Sarah Jacobs, 59 years old, former foster parent, retired nurse. Lived in South Central all her life. She was evicted 6 months ago from a rent-controlled unit because her building got a state contract to convert into a temporary migrant shelter. Karoline's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. She now lives in her car, in a parking lot behind a Walgreens, 3 blocks from a shelter that she used to volunteer at. But she can't stay there, because she doesn't meet the new intake priorities. Someone in the crowd whispered, "That's true." Karoline turned a page in her notes. Then there's Hector Alvarez, served 2 tours in Iraq. Was promised state housing. Waitlisted for 4 years. Last month, that waitlist was paused indefinitely to prioritize incoming humanitarian caseloads. That's the phrase they used, Governor. Not even people, caseloads. By now, the room was still. Not combative. Not loud. Just stunned. She looked back at Newsom, then at the state seal behind him. You want to lead? Then lead the people who put you here. Not the ones flown in through executive discretion. You want sanctuary? Start with your own. Newsom tried to speak, but Karoline raised her hand again. You said this state's heart is big enough for everyone. Maybe. But if the first to be pushed out are vets, nurses, and working-class Americans, then maybe it's time we stop calling that heart generous and start calling it hollow. She let that sit. I'm not here to make headlines. I'm here to make truth unavoidable. And then, slowly, deliberately, she stepped aside, not escorted, not silenced, not dismissed. She walked to the press table and set her documents down. One by one, reporters leaned in to read them. No chants. No shouting. Just the slow unraveling of a narrative that had gone unquestioned for too long. The silence that followed Karoline's last words was broken by the clipped, rehearsed tone of a man in a tailored navy suit standing stage left. That's enough, he said into his mic. We appreciate the passion, but let's not misrepresent official policy with cherry-picked anecdotes. The man was Edward Langley, senior policy advisor to Governor Newsom. Smooth, photogenic, and always ready with a deflection wrapped in buzzwords. He stepped forward, hand in pocket, calm smile plastered across his face. Miss Leavitt is entitled to her opinion. But opinions don't build policy, data does. Karoline didn't flinch. Perfect. Let's talk data. She reached into her folder and pulled out a thick, printed report. This is a 202-page audit from the State Housing Commission, dated June 15, 2025. Page 83, signed by you, Mr. Langley, details the reallocation of $78 million in affordable housing grants, toward what you labeled emergency transitional infrastructure for undocumented arrivals. She slid the page onto the press table, her finger highlighting a line in bold. Langley squinted, his smile faltered. That's a misinterpretation. The funds were redirected due to public health concerns. Nope, Karoline interrupted, flipping the page. Let's read it together. She began reading aloud. Priority 1, secure transitional sites for high-traffic migrant intake centers. Priority 2, temporary shelter procurement. Priority 3, pending allocations for native unhoused populations upon budget reevaluation. She looked up. That's your language. Not mine. And let me translate that for the people watching. Illegals first. Californians, if there's anything left. The crowd stirred again. This time, not with gasps, but with quiet nods, mutterings, people pulling out their phones. Langley's mic cut for a moment. His comm staff scrambled. But Karoline wasn't done. Your department buried this report under 6 layers of sublinks on the state housing website. Why? Because if people actually read this, they'd see it's not about compassion. It's about control. Newsom tried to interject from the side, this is grandstanding. Karoline snapped back, firm but measured. No, Governor. This is reading. Something your voters finally started doing. She held up another document, this time a scanned lease agreement between the city of San Bernardino and a private developer who had just received a $3 million grant to convert an apartment block into a migrant-only shelter. This is why Sarah Jacobs lost her home. That was the line. Gasps turned to murmurs. Reporters turned to one another. A local affiliate producer in the front row tapped his cameraman, clip that now. Karoline placed the documents on the table. Truth isn't dangerous. Power that fears it is. And with that, she stepped back once again, unshaken, unmoved, and utterly unwilling to let the spin cycle wash away the facts. Karoline hadn't even stepped off the makeshift stage before a voice rang out from the crowd, clear, loud, and shaking with something deeper than politics. She's the only one who told the truth. The crowd parted slightly as an older woman, early 60s, stepped forward. Gray-streaked hair, denim jacket, worn hands clasping a photograph. She held the image in the air, her son, a Marine, smiling in front of an American flag. My boy came home and slept in his car for a year. Meanwhile, you built air-conditioned shelters for people who weren't even supposed to be here. Newsom stood frozen, two aides tugging at his sleeve. His PR team was gesturing from behind the barricades, trying to usher him back, but the cameras were now trained on the woman. Karoline turned to her gently, walked over, and took the photo in her hands. What's his name? Jacob Moreno. Karoline looked into the camera, one that had started live streaming again, picked up by independent outlets from Texas to Tennessee. Governor Newsom, she said without blinking, can you look this woman in the eyes and explain to her why Jacob couldn't get a room in the city he defended, because you handed that room to someone who broke federal law to get here? Newsom finally spoke, but not to answer the question. This is political theater, he muttered, stepping forward, his voice cracking under the pressure. You're exploiting pain for attention, Karoline. That's what you do. The woman turned sharply. No. She saw me. The crowd erupted, not in rage, but in something far more dangerous to a politician, conviction. You see us once every 4 years, shouted another man. She's here now. Another woman joined in, you walk past the tents, we live in them. You put us second, someone yelled, but you smile like it's progress. We're not extremists, another man shouted. We're exhausted. Karoline stepped back onto the small riser, now eye to eye with Newsom. You want to talk about optics? Let's talk about the fact that this crowd didn't start shouting until someone told the truth. That's not theater. That's America waking up. The moderator's voice buzzed in weakly through the venue mic system. Please, we need to return to order. But the crowd had found its voice. Karoline's composure didn't waver. She didn't need to yell. She just held up Jacob's photo again. This country isn't broken because we forgot how to build. It's broken because we forgot who we're supposed to build for. Newsom shook his head. His smile returned, tight, corporate, rehearsed. You're not helping, you're dividing. Karoline's reply was calm but sharp. Truth doesn't divide. It exposes who's been lying. And with that, she handed the photo back to Jacob's mother, who was now crying, but not from sadness. From vindication. The silence that followed Karoline's final words didn't last long. Within seconds, phones were up, live streams restarted, and news vans outside began repositioning. What began as a sterile policy panel turned into a media firestorm, and the epicenter was no longer Governor Gavin Newsom. It was her. Reporters surged forward like a tide. The governor's security team instinctively moved closer to him, forming a human buffer. But it was too late, the crowd had shifted. Even the mainstream press couldn't ignore the energy in the room. Karoline, do you think Governor Newsom is intentionally ignoring the homeless crisis? Karoline, how would you respond to critics who say your message was too confrontational? Do you have a solution, or just a soundbite? Fox News went live immediately. A reporter in a red blazer held out her mic with the channel logo glinting under the overhead lights. Even a CNN journalist, usually allergic to her name, leaned in with a question. Karoline didn't flinch. She turned slightly, brushing her hair behind her shoulder, and looked directly into the lens of a local station first, one she knew reached the very people Newsom ignored. You asked if I was being confrontational, she said calmly. Let me ask you, what's more confrontational, telling the truth in this room, or walking past a homeless vet on your way to a fundraiser for foreign migrants? The CNN mic wavered slightly. The correspondent didn't respond. I'm not here to scream, Karoline continued, her voice even but firm. I'm here because someone had to say what everyone else has been whispering. Across the room, Newsom tried to pivot, his team signaling him to speak at his designated podium. He took a step forward but quickly realized something had shifted. The floor, metaphorically and literally, belonged to Karoline. "We are the wealthiest state in the richest country in human history," she said, turning back to the crowd. "And yet our streets are filled with tents, needles, and forgotten Americans." Her voice dropped to a near whisper, forcing people to lean in. "It's not a resource problem. It's a priority problem." One of Newsom's aides whispered to him frantically, but he waved them off and finally stepped up to his podium. "We all want solutions," he began, his tone artificially calm. "But reckless rhetoric doesn't help." Karoline didn't wait. "What's reckless," she cut in, "is celebrating sanctuary policies while our veterans freeze in alleyways." A few gasps. Newsom's face twitched. "What's reckless," she repeated, "is turning this state into a headline factory while families can't afford rent." There was a pause. Then a slow, steady clap from the back. Then another, and another. Until the room filled with applause, not thunderous, but resolute. Karoline stood still, letting the sound echo. She knew this wasn't about scoring points. It was about being heard. And for the first time in a long time, California heard her. Governor Newsom's eyes scanned the room as the clapping finally faded. He reached for the teleprompter script his team had prepared, but it was useless now. The event had lost its script the moment Karoline spoke. He stepped back from the podium, just slightly, but it was enough. Enough for the audience to notice. Enough for the cameras to catch it. Karoline didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. Instead, she took a step forward, past her own seat, ignoring the press still huddled around her. "You can't walk away from this," she said, not yelling, not whispering. "Not when every tent on Venice Beach has a story. Not when every mother sleeping in her car in Fresno is watching this right now." Newsom moved quickly now, trying to exit through a side hallway. But the crowd shifted. Several attendees rose from their chairs, forming a loose circle, holding up signs they hadn't even dared reveal earlier. Signs with sharply written pleas. "My brother died homeless in San Diego. I'm a nurse, and I sleep in my car. We are not invisible." The governor's path was blocked, not by anger, but by reality. Meanwhile, Karoline turned her focus elsewhere. Toward a little girl sitting in the second row, no older than 10, dressed in a hand-me-down jacket 3 sizes too big. She held a cardboard sign that read, "My dad's a vet. He lives in a tent." Karoline crouched down. "What's your name?" she asked softly. "Kaylee," the girl replied. Karoline reached into her bag and pulled out a small, pocket-sized copy of the U.S. Constitution. She handed it to the girl gently. "This is yours now," she said. "Because this still belongs to you, even if they forget." The cameras caught it all. The gesture wasn't for show, it was instinct. And it hit harder than any speech ever could. Behind them, the chants began. Slow, steady, and growing. "America first. America first." Newsom's aides finally carved a path to the exit. But the moment had already escaped him. He wasn't the center of the story anymore. By the time Karoline stood back up, the energy in the room had completely shifted. The press wasn't chasing Gavin Newsom anymore, they were chasing the story. And the story was standing in front of a little girl named Kaylee, holding a pocket constitution and refusing to move for politics. Karoline turned back toward the podium, but she didn't go up to it. She didn't need a mic anymore. Her voice, steady and loud, carried without one. "I want every veteran sleeping under a bridge to know they are not forgotten. I want every single mother living in a shelter with her kids to know they're seen. And I want the politicians in this country, especially the ones who love their own image, to know this: we're done funding failure." That was it. 3 sentences. But they carried more truth than the hour-long speech Newsom had rehearsed for. And just like that, the crowd rose. Not in protest. In applause. Veterans in worn jackets stood and saluted. Mothers clutched their children a little tighter. Even a few aides from the back, those who worked inside the system, lowered their heads in quiet agreement. This wasn't a political moment. It was a moral one. Cameras rolled, and the footage hit live feeds instantly. Karoline's speech was clipped, captioned, and streamed across every platform before Newsom could even reach the car. He was met outside by silence. No reporters. No crowd. Just one staffer asking if he wanted to post a response. He didn't. Inside the venue, Karoline walked down the aisle, not escorted, not guarded, but surrounded by regular Americans who suddenly felt seen. A man in flannel whispered to her, "They won't be able to spin this." She looked at him and replied simply, "Let them try." And that was the quote that made the front page the next morning. The next morning, Gavin Newsom's comms team scrambled to regain control. They pushed out infographics, press statements, and pre-scheduled videos showcasing California's so-called humanitarian leadership. But the algorithm didn't care. The top post across social media wasn't Newsom's cleanup campaign. It was Karoline Leavitt standing in front of that girl, holding the Constitution, saying 5 words that stuck like nails in the country's conscience. You step over your own. Americans didn't just watch the clip, they felt it. Because they were living it. Comments poured in from truckers, teachers, farmers, nurses. Not bots. Not burner accounts. Real people who'd felt invisible for far too long. Finally, someone said it. She spoke for us, not at us. I'm not even a Republican, but this hit me hard. Meanwhile, Newsom's donor base bristled behind closed doors. Internal polls showed a sharp drop in favorability, not among progressives, but among independents and working-class voters. It was no longer about left or right. It was about real or performative. And Gavin's mask had slipped. Later that week, Karoline appeared on national television. She wasn't dressed for spectacle. No stylist. No stage lighting. Just her cross necklace, her clear voice, and a message that cut through every spin room in D.C. We are not cruel for wanting borders. We are not hateful for asking why veterans sleep on sidewalks. And we are not extremists for believing Americans should come first in their own country. The host didn't interrupt. He couldn't. And by the end of the segment, viewers weren't just applauding. They were signing up. What had started as another staged political speech had turned into something else entirely. A moment of clarity. A reckoning. A reminder that when truth is spoken plainly, even the polished elite can't talk over it. Karoline didn't win applause that night. She sparked a movement. And Gavin Newsom? He was still searching for a comeback line. When the cameras turn off and the applause fades, we are left with one truth: leadership is not about pleasing headlines or donors. It's about protecting the people who built this nation, and who are being forgotten every single day. I didn't come here to be liked. I came here to speak for those who are never invited into the room. And I will not back down.